The town of Blackwood, in rural Oregon, was a place where time seemed to move slower. Wooden houses with worn-out porches, giant trees that covered the sky, and a community united by ancient bonds, forged by isolation and history. It was in this setting of tranquility that Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned 35-year-old geneticist, arrived, driven by a mission that mixed scientific ambition with a personal need for escape. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the main street, cracked asphalt and uneven sidewalks as Evelyn drove her rented SUV. The landscape was breathtaking, but something in the air of Blackwood felt heavy. A sense that the roots of that town delved into something more than just the earth. She came from Boston, leaving behind a professional scandal that had tarnished her reputation. A controversial research on genetic inheritance and criminal behavior. The case of a serial killer who claimed to have a violence gene was discredited by the scientific community. But the idea haunted Evelyn. Blackwood, and the Blackwood family in particular, offered a second chance. The Blackwood family was the founder of the town, and their legacy was legendary. For generations they lived in a secluded Victorian mansion on a hill, with a reputation for being eccentric but also incredibly talented and successful. However, what intrigued Evelyn was the history of rare diseases and disturbing behaviors that seemed to run in the family, a disturbing pattern that had been dismissed as mere family eccentricities. This was her chance to prove her theories, to redeem her career, and to confront the ghosts of her past. Her first meeting was with Elias Blackwood, the current patriarch. He lived in the ancient mansion, a place that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood, dust, and something else. Something musty and subtly metallic. Elias, a man in his 60s with a posture as rigid as the wood of his furniture, and eyes the color of cold steel, received her in the library, a room filled with books that looked untouched for decades. "Dr. Reed, welcome to Blackwood," he said, his voice raspy, as if from disuse. "My family's legacy is vast, and our history is, shall we say, complex. You're here to study our genes, correct?" "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. I've read about the unique conditions that have affected your family over the years. I believe I can shed some light on them. I want to understand the origins of these conditions," Evelyn replied, trying to sound confident despite the uneasiness she felt. "The origins are simple, Doctor. Our blood is different, stronger. It's the secret of our success. But every secret comes with a price," Elias said, a strange, knowing smile on his lips. "My family has lived with these peculiarities for a long time. They're a part of us." Evelyn's research began with old medical records and family journals that Elias provided. The more she delved into the documents, the more she felt a growing unease. The records described cases of extreme phobias, sudden aggressive outbursts, and a strange, progressive loss of empathy among family members, often manifesting at specific ages. The descriptions were clinical, but Evelyn could read the human terror between the lines. The journals were even more disturbing. They were filled with cryptic warnings and desperate pleas. "He changed after his 30th birthday. The light in his eyes is gone. He's no longer my brother. The whispers in the walls are getting louder. I see things in the shadows, but they tell me it's all in my head. My son, he looks at me like a stranger, a coldness that no child should have." Evelyn decided she needed to get closer to the family to see them up close. She asked Elias if she could interview some of the younger members. He agreed, with a cold lack of emotion. "You can try, Dr. Reed, but they don't like to be questioned. They have their own ways." Her first interview was with Elias's niece, Clara, a young woman with a delicate appearance and a quiet, almost spectral voice. Clara lived in a small, isolated cottage on the property, and her eyes held a constant look of fear. When Evelyn asked about the family's history, Clara tensed up. "We don't talk about these things," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "The past, it's better to leave it buried. It can be contagious. Evelyn pushed gently. Contagious? What do you mean? Clara looked away, her hands trembling. My father, my uncle, they all changed. It's like a mask. You think you know them, and then it's gone. The person you knew is gone. As Evelyn returned to the mansion that night, a storm was brewing. The wind howled through the trees, and the old house creaked and groaned as if in pain. A sudden blackout left her in complete darkness. She fumbled for her phone's flashlight and saw a figure in the hall. It was Elias. I see you're determined to unearth our secrets, Doctor, he said, his voice now devoid of its previous formality, a cold, predatory tone in its place. Just be careful. Some things are better left buried. The light flickered back on, and Elias was gone. The chilling encounter left Evelyn shaken, but more determined than ever. She knew she was on to something. The Blackwood family wasn't just a case study in genetics. They were a living mystery, a human drama of unimaginable proportions. The feeling of being watched intensified, and she knew her presence had already disturbed the fragile balance of that family. And that's exactly what she wanted to do. She had to understand what was really happening in that house. She was not leaving. If you're as intrigued as I am by the secrets of the Blackwood family, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. Remember, this is a fictional story, but the terror is very real. The following morning, a thin mist hung over Blackwood, clinging to the old buildings and muffling the sound of distant traffic. Evelyn awoke early, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind. Elias's voice, cold and menacing, echoed in her thoughts. His warning wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. She knew that to truly understand the family, she had to look beyond the mansion walls. The town itself, with its deep-seated history, held the answers. She drove down to the heart of the town, a small square with a few shops and a library. The Blackwood family's influence was everywhere, from the town hall, a large stone building with a plaque dedicating it to the Blackwood lineage, to the old clock tower, whose bell chimed with a solemn, heavy sound. The townspeople were friendly but reserved, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. When she mentioned the Blackwoods, their expressions would tighten, and they would quickly change the subject. Evelyn decided to start at the source of all local knowledge, the Blackwood County Historical Society. It was a dusty building with shelves full of old newspapers and ledgers. The archivist, a kind elderly woman named Martha, was the one person who didn't shy away from the topic. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, but her resolve was clear. You're the doctor studying the Blackwoods, aren't you? Martha asked, her voice low. People around here, they think it's just eccentricities. But I've been here for 60 years. I've seen things. Evelyn leaned in, her voice hushed. What have you seen, Martha? The changes, Martha whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if someone were listening. They don't happen to all of them, but when they do, it's like a switch is flipped. The light goes out. There was Thomas Blackwood, the mayor back in the 50s. He was a good man, everyone loved him. Then, around his 30th birthday, he just stopped being Thomas. He became cold, calculating. He started making decisions that hurt the town, but helped his family. He'd look at you, and you'd feel like you were nothing more than a number. Evelyn remembered the journal entry she'd read, the one talking about a change after a 30th birthday. The pattern was starting to emerge. Are there any records of this? Anything about specific incidents? Martha nodded, pointing to a section of old town council meeting minutes. They tried to challenge him, but he always won. It was like he knew what everyone was going to do before they did it. People said he was a genius, a visionary. But I saw the way he looked at his own children, like they were property. Evelyn spent hours in the archives, poring over the documents. She found a consistent pattern. Every few generations, a prominent Blackwood would undergo a dramatic personality shift. The person would lose all emotional connection, become ruthless, and focus solely on the family's power and wealth. The symptoms were always dismissed as the Blackwood genius or a strong business sense. But Evelyn knew better. This wasn't genius. This was something pathological. She found a specific set of records that sent a shiver down her spine. A series of police reports from the 1920s about a Blackwood family member named Arthur. The reports were vague and quickly closed, but they described an aggressive assault on a farmhand who had reportedly stolen a horse. The horse was later found to be Arthur's. The farmhand was beaten so badly he was hospitalized. The reports were sealed, but Evelyn could read the handwritten notes on the margins, scrawled in a frantic hand. He showed no remorse, said he was teaching a lesson. The man's leg was broken, and Arthur laughed. This was not a rare disease. This was a pattern of behavior. The question was, what was causing it? The initial assumption was a genetic mutation, but the symptoms were too specific and too linked to behavior, not a physical ailment. The loss of empathy wasn't a side effect, it was the main symptom. It was a psychological change, not a physiological one. Evelyn drove back to the mansion, the mist now a thick pea-soup fog. The visibility was almost zero, and she had to drive slowly, her headlights cutting through the white haze. The isolation of Blackwood, which had once felt comforting, now felt oppressive. She was an outsider, digging into secrets the town desperately wanted to keep buried. As she pulled up to the mansion, a figure emerged from the shadows of the porch. It was Elias. He stood there, unmoving, watching her. Evelyn's heart pounded against her ribs. She was becoming more and more convinced that his warnings were not just about the family's secrets, but about her own safety. She got out of the car, her hands cold and clammy. "Mr. Blackwood, I was just at the Historical Society." Elias's cold eyes seemed to pierce through the fog. "I know, Doctor. My family built this town. There isn't a single brick here that doesn't have our name on it, or a secret we don't know about." His voice was a low growl. "You're getting too close. I can assure you, the history books are not the full story, and the full story is not something you want to know." He turned and disappeared back into the darkness of the mansion, leaving Evelyn alone in the swirling fog, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the frantic beat of her own heart. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a game with rules that were changing by the minute. She knew she had to find a way to get the real story before it was too late. The feeling of being watched was no longer a vague notion, it was a certainty. And the watcher was Elias. Evelyn realized she had made a critical miscalculation. She had focused on the science, the genetics, but the Blackwood family's terrifying legacy was not one of DNA. It was one of control, of manipulation, and of a chilling human cruelty passed down through generations. And she was standing on the precipice of a truth far more disturbing than any genetic disease. The night was long and restless for Evelyn. Elias's veiled threat and the ominous atmosphere of the town had left her on edge. The mansion's old plumbing groaned, and the wind whispered through the ancient eaves, each sound making her jump. She felt like a trespasser in a house that was actively trying to push her out. The only thing that kept her going was the burning curiosity and a grim determination to uncover the truth. The next morning, Evelyn made a list. She needed a new angle. Interviewing Elias's loyal family members was a dead end. They were either too afraid or too brainwashed to talk. She needed an outsider, someone who had escaped the family's suffocating grasp. She returned to the Historical Society, this time asking Martha for a favor. "Martha, were there any Blackwoods who left town? Any who were estranged from the family?" Martha's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "Oh yes, there was Silas Blackwood. Elias's younger brother. He left over 30 years ago. I remember his father. Elias's father was furious. Silas never came back, said he couldn't live under their dark cloud anymore. Evelyn's heart pounded. This was exactly what she needed. Do you know where he went? Martha rummaged through a box of old mail and found a faded address in Portland, Oregon. It was an old address, but it was a lead. Evelyn drove the 4 hours to Portland, the landscape changing from dense forest to urban sprawl. The address was a modest, 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A man in his late 50s with kind eyes and graying hair answered the door. He had the same sharp, angular features as Elias, but his face was softer, etched with lines of worry rather than control. "Silas Blackwood?" Evelyn asked, holding out her card. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Reed. I'm doing research on your family's history." Silas stared at her, his face a mixture of surprise and fear. He let her in, leading her to a small, cluttered living room filled with old photographs. He sat on a worn armchair, his hands clasped tightly. "The family. They sent you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "No, Silas. I came on my own. I believe your family's history is more complex than a simple genetic condition. I think it's a pattern of behavior," Evelyn explained, choosing her words carefully. Silas exhaled slowly, as if releasing a breath he had held for decades. "It's not genetics, Doctor. It's a sickness. A sickness of the mind, and it's passed down, not in our blood, but in our words." He began to tell his story, a torrent of words pouring out, as if he had been waiting a lifetime to confess. "My father was the same way as Elias. Charming, brilliant, but underneath, he was a monster. They call it the Blackwood genius, but it's not a gift, it's a curse. They find the most sensitive, empathetic children, the ones who feel things deeply, and they break them. They break their spirit. It's a system, a process." Evelyn leaned forward, a sense of dawning horror gripping her. "A process? What kind of process?" "They isolate you. They tell you that you're too emotional, too weak. They make you doubt your own sanity. They gaslight you. They make you question everything you feel. My father would lock me in a room for hours, telling me that the noises I heard were in my head. He'd create small, cruel situations to test my reactions, to see if I could be molded into what he wanted. He called it strengthening the soul. But it wasn't about strength. It was about control." Silas described a systematic process of emotional and psychological manipulation. The selected children were constantly criticized, their accomplishments belittled, their emotions dismissed as childish. They were taught that to feel was a weakness, and that true strength lay in cold, ruthless efficiency. The symptoms you're seeing, the lack of empathy, the aggression, they're not natural. They're a result of the training. The family creates its own monsters. They choose the ones who are most pliable, and they break them down until they're nothing but a shell. Then they rebuild them in their own image. Evelyn remembered the descriptions in the old journals, the sudden changes, the loss of light in their eyes. It wasn't a sudden genetic switch. It was a culmination of a lifetime of psychological abuse. The 30th birthday was a rite of passage, a final test to see if the subject was fully broken and ready to take their place in the family's grand design. Silas's voice grew thick with emotion. "I saw what they were doing to my brother, Elias. I tried to stop it, but he was too far gone. He was already a reflection of my father. I ran away. I had to. If I had stayed, I would have been next." He showed Evelyn an old journal, his father's, which he had secretly taken with him. It was a manual, a horrifying guide to the psychological torture. It was filled with notes on how to manipulate a child's mind, how to erase their empathy, and how to create the perfect heir. The journal confirmed everything Silas said. This wasn't a family of geniuses, it was a family of sociopaths, breeding and cultivating their own brand of human cruelty. The genetic case was a meticulously crafted lie, a cover for their horrifying practices. Silas looked at Evelyn, his eyes pleading. "You have to expose them, Doctor, for the sake of Clara and the rest of them. They are trapped. They don't know who they are anymore. It's the most insane case of human cruelty I've ever seen." Evelyn thanked him and left, her mind reeling. The air of the city seemed to get heavier, filled with the weight of this new, terrible knowledge. She had come to Blackwood seeking a scientific discovery, a simple gene that explained human violence. Instead, she had found a darkness far more profound and terrifying, a darkness born not of blood, but of a broken mind. And she knew that the danger had just gotten real. The long drive back to Blackwood was a blur of rain and reflection. Silas's words and the horrifying contents of his father's journal had changed everything. The genetic case was a lie, a smokescreen for a systematic, generations-long campaign of psychological abuse. The symptoms Evelyn had been studying weren't a biological defect. They were the terrifying consequences of emotional and psychological torture. The changes in the Blackwoods weren't random occurrences. They were the final product of a meticulous, cruel process. Evelyn felt a new sense of urgency. The Blackwoods were not a research subject. They were a group of victims and their tormentors. Clara, the young woman with the fearful eyes, was likely in the midst of this training process. Evelyn's mission had shifted from professional curiosity to a desperate race to expose the truth and save those still trapped in the mansion. Upon her return, the air in Blackwood was still thick with an oppressive silence. Elias was watching her. She was sure of it. She felt his eyes on her even when she was alone in her room. She knew she couldn't stay in the mansion much longer. Her next move had to be carefully planned. She needed more proof, something undeniable to take to the authorities, and she needed an ally. Evelyn decided to try to speak with Clara again, but this time with the knowledge she had gained from Silas. She waited until late in the evening, when the house was silent, and Elias was likely in his study. She slipped out and made her way through the dark grounds, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and old pine. Clara's cottage was a small stone building, a little apart from the main house. A faint light emanated from a window. She knocked softly. Clara opened the door, her face pale in the dim light. Her eyes widened in fear when she saw Evelyn. "Dr. Reed, you shouldn't be here. He'll find out," Clara whispered, looking nervously over her shoulder. "Clara, please," Evelyn said, keeping her voice low. "I need to talk to you. I've been speaking to Silas. I know what's happening. The changes, they aren't real, are they? It's what they do to you." Clara's eyes filled with tears and she nodded slowly, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "He says I'm too sensitive, that I feel too much. He makes me watch things on the news, terrible things, and tells me I can't cry. He says a Blackwood never cries. He says emotions are a weakness." Evelyn's heart ached for her. "He's wrong, Clara. That's abuse. He's breaking you down. He says it's for my own good, that it's the only way to be strong like them. He says it's in our blood, that some of us just have to be cleansed of our weakness." A twig snapped in the woods behind the cottage. Clara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror. "Someone's here. You have to go, now." Evelyn didn't hesitate. She squeezed Clara's hand and ran back towards the mansion, the sounds of the night feeling menacing and amplified. She reached her room just as she heard the front door of the mansion close with a heavy, final thud. She was certain someone had been watching them. Her attempt to help Clara had just made things worse. The next morning, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted. It was no longer one of quiet tension. It was one of palpable danger. Elias met her at breakfast, his face a mask of cold fury. "My niece is unwell, Dr. Reed. You should not be speaking to her. She is fragile. His voice was a low snarl, a clear and direct threat. I'm afraid your research here has concluded. I must ask you to leave. Now. Evelyn's mind raced. He knew. He had a way of knowing everything. She needed to get out, but not without the evidence. She had to take the journals. She also had to find the local police officer or a lawyer she could trust. She had to expose him. Later that day, as Evelyn packed her meager belongings, Elias's cold warning echoed in her mind. She realized how deep the rabbit hole went. Elias wasn't just the patriarch of a cruel family. He was a master manipulator, a puppeteer who controlled not just his family, but the entire town. The police, the doctors, the townspeople. They all had a long-standing relationship with the Blackwoods. Who could she trust? She remembered a young police officer she had seen at the diner, a woman named Officer Miller. Her face had been kind, her eyes sharp. She had not had the same look of fear as the others. Evelyn decided to take a risk. She would drive to the police station and tell her everything. It was her only hope. As she drove through the town, she couldn't shake the feeling that every window held a pair of eyes watching her. The houses, the trees, even the old clock tower seemed to be part of Elias's grand, horrifying conspiracy. She had come to Blackwood for a professional redemption, and instead she had stumbled upon a human horror story, a dark legacy built on broken minds and shattered spirits. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that Elias Blackwood would not let her leave with his secrets. This was no longer just a case study, it was a matter of life and death. The chilling truth was that the monsters of Blackwood were not born, they were meticulously made. If you're still with me, you're just as captivated by the secrets of Blackwood as I am. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get all the new chapters and unravel the rest of this terrifying story. Remember, this is a work of fiction, but the horror is as real as it gets. The Blackwood County Police Station was a small, unassuming brick building with a single police cruiser parked outside. The air inside was still and stale, a stark contrast to the oppressive tension Evelyn had left behind at the mansion. Officer Miller, a woman in her late 20s with a serious demeanor and a calm gaze, was at the front desk. She looked up as Evelyn entered, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Dr. Reed, I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice even. "I heard you were leaving town." Evelyn's heart pounded. So he was already spreading the word. The information traveled fast in Blackwood. "Officer Miller, I need to talk to you. In private. It's about the Blackwood family." Miller's face remained neutral, but she gestured to a small, empty office behind her desk. "Go ahead. We can talk in here." Evelyn sat down, her hands trembling. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her words a torrent of information. She told Miller everything about her arrival, her research, the disturbing journals, the conversation with Elias, and the shocking confession from Silas. She explained how the genetic disorder was a lie, a cover for a systematic, generations-long campaign of psychological abuse. Miller listened patiently, her expression never changing. She took notes, but her questions were sharp and to the point. "So you're saying Elias Blackwood is a serial abuser? That he's systematically breaking down his own family members?" "Yes," Evelyn said, her voice cracking with emotion. "And it's not just him. It's a legacy. They teach the next generation to do the same thing. They create their own monsters. The victims, like Clara, are suffering from severe psychological trauma. The lack of empathy, the sudden aggression, it's not a gene, it's the result of torture." Miller closed her notebook and looked Evelyn straight in the eye. "Dr. Reed, I know this town. I grew up here. The Blackwoods. They have a lot of power. They've been helping the police department for years. They've donated equipment, funded training programs. People here don't like to hear bad things about them." Evelyn felt a wave of despair. Are you saying you won't help? That you're going to ignore this? No, Miller said, her voice firm. I'm saying you've just given me a very serious allegation against the most powerful family in this county. I can't just go and arrest Elias Blackwood based on your testimony. I need evidence, hard evidence. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. I have the old journals, the medical records. The journal from Silas's father is the key, but Elias took the ones from the mansion. He knows what they say. I need physical evidence from the mansion itself, Miller stated. Something that proves this is an ongoing crime. Something that shows abuse, not just history. Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope. Miller believed her. She wasn't just another Blackwood pawn. I can go back. I can find something. Miller shook her head. No, it's too dangerous. He knows you're a threat. You're a trained geneticist, not a detective. You'd be walking into a trap. Evelyn's desperation was growing. I can't just leave Clara there. I have to do something. Miller sighed, running a hand through her hair. I can't authorize a raid based on this, but there's something you might not know. The mansion was built by Elias's great-grandfather, a man who was reportedly a genius inventor. There are rumors of hidden passages and secret rooms, places where he kept his work. If you can find something in one of those places, something that proves this isn't just a historical pattern, but an active, ongoing conspiracy, that would give me enough to get a search warrant. Evelyn's mind raced. A secret room. It was the perfect place to hide the darkest secrets of the Blackwood family. How would I find it? I don't know, Miller admitted. But if you're as good a detective as you are a scientist, you'll figure it out. Look for something that doesn't fit. A misplaced book, a loose brick, a change in the pattern of the wallpaper. Evelyn knew this was her only chance. She had to go back. She had to find the secret room, but she couldn't do it alone. I need help. I need a distraction. I can't just walk in there and start looking. Miller's expression hardened with resolve. I'll do what I can. I'll stage a disturbance, a fake complaint at the mansion. It will draw Elias's attention away, just for a little while. That's all the time you'll have. Evelyn left the police station feeling a mix of terror and determination. She had found an unlikely ally, a beacon of hope in a sea of darkness. But now she was stepping back into the lion's den. The air of Blackwood felt heavier, the trees darker, the silence more menacing. She had come here for a case, but she had become part of the story. She was no longer just an observer. She was a participant, and her life and the lives of the trapped Blackwoods depended on her next move. She knew that Elias was a master of his domain, and she was walking right into it. But the thought of Clara's terrified face was all the motivation she needed. The night Evelyn returned to the Blackwood mansion, the air was thick with a tense, expectant silence. The storm from a few nights ago had passed, but the sky remained a deep, bruised purple, mirroring the state of Evelyn's nerves. She had made a plan with Officer Miller. The staged disturbance was scheduled for 9 p.m. Evelyn would have a small window of time to get inside, find the secret room, and gather the evidence. She waited in her car, parked a good distance from the main house, watching the windows. At exactly 9 p.m., she saw the flashing blue and red lights of a police cruiser in the distance. The car pulled up to the front gate of the mansion, and a few minutes later, Officer Miller emerged, walking toward the front door. Evelyn saw Elias Blackwood open the door, his posture stiff with irritation. He and Miller began a tense, low-volume conversation on the porch. The distraction had begun. Evelyn took a deep breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She moved swiftly, a shadow in the darkness. She slipped through a side entrance she had previously noticed was unlocked and made her way through the labyrinthine halls of the mansion. The house was silent, but Evelyn felt 1,000 eyes on her. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning. She went to the library, the one room Elias held with a particular reverence. The room was dark, but the moonlight filtered through the large windows, casting long, eerie shadows. Evelyn fumbled for her phone and used its flashlight to scan the room. She was looking for something that didn't fit, something out of place. She moved methodically, running her hand along the spines of the old books, feeling for a loose one. She pushed against the wood paneling, testing for a hidden door. Nothing. The minutes ticked by. Evelyn's hands were clammy, her anxiety mounting. She knew her time was running out. She remembered something Miller had said. Look for a change in the pattern. She looked at the books, their bindings worn and aged. Most of them were classics, philosophical texts, history books. But one small section held an assortment of seemingly random books on botany, architecture, and engineering. These did not fit with the rest of the collection. Evelyn pulled one of them out, a book on Victorian-era construction. As she did, she heard a soft click. She scanned the wall behind the books and saw a faint seam, a hairline crack in the wood paneling that was nearly invisible in the dim light. She pushed on the panel, and with a soft groan, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a small, dark room. Evelyn slipped inside, pulling the panel shut behind her. The air was colder, and the scent was a potent mix of old paper and dust. She turned on her phone's flashlight. The room was not what she expected. It was not a grand study or a hidden vault. It was a workshop filled with strange contraptions and journals, piles of journals stacked from floor to ceiling. She grabbed the first one and opened it. The handwriting was neat, precise. It was a logbook, and the contents turned her blood to ice. It was a meticulous record of the training process, not just from Elias's father, but from generations before. Each journal was a new installment, a detailed account of how to break a person's spirit. Subject 12, Clara, age 16, displays high levels of empathy, needs constant exposure to controlled cruelty. She must be taught that to feel is to be weak. Begin daily sessions of psychological conditioning. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea. The journals were horrifying in their clinical precision. They detailed the techniques of gaslighting, of emotional deprivation, of creating stress tests to measure the breaking point of the subjects. She found a ledger detailing the results of these experiments and the disposal of the subjects who did not yield. The euphemisms were chilling. Failed subjects were relocated to a new state of being. The term was likely a euphemism for murder or permanent institutionalization. Then she found it. A large, leather-bound journal titled The Blackwood Legacy, a blueprint for human perfection. She opened it to the first page, and the elegant cursive handwriting of Elias Blackwood's great-grandfather leaped out at her. The journal outlined the entire philosophy, the idea that humanity was flawed by its emotions and that the Blackwoods, through a process of selective psychological breeding, could create a superior, ruthless, and emotionless lineage. They weren't a family of geniuses. They were a family of psychopaths, deliberately engineered. The genetic case was the ultimate lie, a terrifying cover for a chilling human experiment. Evelyn heard a faint sound outside the room. She looked at her phone. The distraction had ended. She heard Elias's voice, a low and dangerous growl. He was close. She knew she had to get out, and she had to take the evidence with her. She grabbed the ledger and the blueprint journal, stuffing them into her bag. The thud of a closing door echoed through the hall. He was coming. She needed to escape. The horror she felt was not from the fear of being caught, but from the grim reality of what she had just discovered. The Blackwood family was a monument to human evil, and she was the only one who could expose them. Evelyn slipped out of the secret room, the heavy journals a weight on her shoulder, and a chilling certainty in her mind. The mansion was silent, a vast, breathing beast in the night. She moved through the dark hallways, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out. The front door was too risky. She made her way to a back service entrance she had seen earlier. As she reached the door, a light flickered on. The hallway was suddenly bathed in a cold yellow glow. Standing at the end of the hall, a few feet away, was Elias Blackwood. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture as rigid as ever. But his face was different. The cold mask had cracked, revealing a chilling fury beneath. "Leaving so soon, Dr. Reed?" he said, his voice a low, dangerous purr. "I thought you were enjoying your stay. Perhaps you found what you were looking for." Evelyn didn't try to deny it. She gripped her bag tighter. "I found everything, Mr. Blackwood. I found the truth. You don't have a genetic gift, you have a pathology. A sickness of the mind, passed down not through your DNA, but through a terrifying system of abuse. You're not breeding genius, you're breeding monsters." A thin, cold smile spread across Elias's face. "Monsters? You have a flair for the dramatic, Doctor. We are simply perfecting the human race. Emotions are a weakness. Empathy is a flaw. We have spent centuries creating a lineage free from the shackles of sentimentality. We are logical. We are efficient. We are the future of humanity." He started to walk towards her, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Evelyn backed away slowly, her eyes darting for an escape. "You're a sociopath, Elias, and you've been torturing your own family members for generations." "Torture? No, Doctor. I call it sculpting. We select the children with the greatest emotional capacity, the ones who feel the most. And then we break that capacity down, piece by piece, until nothing remains but pure, rational thought." Clara. She was a masterpiece of emotional depth. It's been a challenge, but she is almost complete. His eyes gleamed with a chilling pride. "I've erased her fears, her sorrows, her love. Soon she will be perfect, just like me." He was close now. Evelyn felt the coldness emanating from him. This was not a man driven by a twisted science. He was a man consumed by a terrifying ideology. He was a product of his own family's horrifying legacy. "It will stop now, Elias," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but firm. "I have the journals. The police know. It's over." A genuine guttural laugh escaped Elias's throat, a sound devoid of all warmth. "The police? That foolish girl, Miller? My family has been supporting the Blackwood County Police Department for 100 years, Doctor. The chief is a good friend. Your word against mine. Who do you think they'll believe? A disgraced geneticist from Boston, or the most respected family in the state?" Evelyn felt a wave of despair. He was right. He had all the power. "You won't get away with this. I'll take this story to the national news. I'll expose you for what you are." "You won't leave this house with those journals, Doctor," he said, his eyes narrowing. "You've gone from a curious scientist to a nuisance, and in our world, nuisances are disposed of." He lunged for her, his movements surprisingly swift for a man his age. Evelyn dodged him, the heavy bag swinging wildly. She dropped it, the book spilling onto the floor. Elias's eyes went wide as he saw the ledger and the leather-bound blueprint journal. His attention was on the journals now, not her. It was her chance. She bolted for the door, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her ears. She was almost there when she heard a sound behind her, a sickening thud, followed by a heavy silence. She turned, her breath catching in her throat. Elias was on the ground, a single sharp object sticking out of his neck. Standing over him, her face pale and her hands trembling, was Clara. In her hand, she held a large, ornate letter opener. Her eyes, which had always held a terrified vulnerability, were now a mix of fear and something else. A cold, hard resolve. He said, "Emotions are a weakness," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "He lied. My fear, it made me do this." She looked down at the motionless body of her uncle. My sadness. It's gone. I'm empty. Evelyn stared at her, a profound sadness washing over her. Clara had broken, she'd been pushed too far, and in that moment of terror the conditioning had taken over. The emotional capacity that Elias had tried so hard to erase had not been erased at all. It had been replaced by a chilling, learned violence. The sculpting was complete, but the masterpiece was a monster. Evelyn knew she had to get out. But now she was not just running from a madman, she was running from a victim, a perfect victim. This is the turning point. The mystery is solved, but the true horror has just been revealed. If you want to know what happens to Evelyn and Clara, and if the Blackwood family's secrets will finally be exposed, like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion. Clara stood over Elias's body, a ghost in the dim light of the hallway, the letter opener still in her hand. Her face, a moment ago a mask of fear, was now a hollow canvas, devoid of all emotion. The moment of violence, born from a lifetime of abuse, had shattered her. She was the walking proof of the Blackwood legacy, the creation of a ruthless, emotionless person. She was what Elias had always wanted her to be. But the irony was that it was in the act of rebellion, not compliance, that her training had been completed. Evelyn, still frozen by shock, finally found her voice. Clara, we have to go. We have to get out of here. The police. Clara didn't respond. She just stared at Elias's body, her eyes vacant, as if seeing nothing. She dropped the letter opener, and it clattered on the marble floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. Evelyn knew she couldn't leave Clara behind, not like this. She rushed to her, grabbing her arm. Clara, please, we need to leave now. Clara resisted, her movements stiff and unnatural. I am not Clara, she said, her voice monotone. Clara was weak. She felt. She cried. She is gone. Evelyn's heart sank. Elias had won. Even in death, his monstrous legacy continued. The psychological conditioning was so profound, so complete, that it had taken over in the most traumatic moment. Evelyn looked at the fallen journals, the evidence of 100 years of human cruelty. She couldn't leave them. She had to take them. They were the only key to exposing the Blackwoods and freeing the others still trapped in this horrifying system. She quickly scooped up the journals, stuffing them back into her bag. As she did, she heard the sound of footsteps coming from the other end of the hall. Another family member, one of Elias's loyal followers, was coming. Clara, let's go, Evelyn pleaded, tugging at her arm. Clara turned to her, her face a blank slate. He said you were a nuisance. He said nuisances are disposed of. Evelyn saw the cold calculation in her eyes and felt a sudden terror. Clara wasn't a victim anymore. She was a product, a perfectly engineered weapon. Evelyn released her arm and stumbled backward. Just as the other family member, Elias's nephew, came into view, Evelyn bolted for the back service door. She heard a shout behind her, and then the thud of running footsteps. She was running for her life. The once quiet mansion was now a hunting ground, and she was the prey. She burst out into the cold night air, the heavy bag a burden on her shoulder. She ran across the lawn, toward the edge of the property. She could hear them gaining on her. The nephew, his face contorted in a mask of rage, and behind him, a slow, methodical pace. It was Clara. Evelyn risked a glance back and saw Clara walking with a chilling, purpose-driven stride, as if on a mission. The fear was gone, replaced by a ruthless efficiency. Evelyn reached the outer gates of the property. They were locked. She fumbled with the clasp, her fingers numb with cold and panic. The footsteps were getting closer. Just as the nephew was about to grab her, a loud siren wailed in the distance, and the flashing lights of a police car sliced through the darkness. Officer Miller. She had come back. Miller's cruiser pulled up to the gate, and she jumped out. her hand on her weapon. "Officer Miller, drop it! Put your hands up!" she shouted at the nephew. The nephew hesitated, his eyes wide with surprise. Clara stopped a few feet behind him, her face still impassive. The police chief, a large man with a stern face, got out of the passenger side of the cruiser. "What's the meaning of this, Miller?" the chief demanded. "I told you to leave the Blackwoods alone." "Chief, there's a body in the mansion," Miller said, her voice firm. "And I have evidence of a multi-generational criminal conspiracy." She looked at Evelyn. "Dr. Reed has the evidence." The chief's eyes went from Miller to Evelyn. He looked at the heavy bag in her hand, then to the motionless figure of Elias's nephew, and finally to Clara, standing still as a statue in the darkness. The gravity of the situation hit him. He pulled out his radio. "We have a homicide at the Blackwood residence. I need a forensics team and backup here immediately." As more police sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn sank to her knees, the heavy bag finally dropping to the ground. She was safe. She had the evidence. But the victory felt hollow. The truth she had uncovered was far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. The Blackwood family wasn't just a subject of a macabre genetic case. It was a living, breathing testament to how a twisted ideology passed down through generations could create monsters out of human beings. And she had just watched one of them be born. The aftermath was a whirlwind of flashing lights, hushed voices, and cold officialdom. The Oregon State Police and the FBI descended upon Blackwood, their presence a stark contrast to the town's usual quiet. The Blackwood mansion, once a symbol of prestige and power, was now a crime scene. A large yellow tape cordoned off the property, a grim testament to the dark secrets it held. Evelyn and Officer Miller were taken to the police station for their official statements. Evelyn recounted everything she had discovered, from the initial medical records to her meeting with Silas, and finally, the horrifying contents of the secret room. She presented the journals she had found, the meticulous records of abuse and psychological manipulation, and the chilling blueprint of the family's twisted philosophy. The police chief, a man who had once been a close friend of Elias, now sat with his head in his hands, a look of profound shock and betrayal on his face. The evidence was undeniable. The journals, filled with decades of meticulously logged abuse and a clinical detachment to human suffering, were a chilling testament to the Blackwood's true nature. The death of Elias and Clara's subsequent arrest were just the tip of a much larger and more terrifying iceberg. The investigation uncovered more horrors. The police, acting on Evelyn's information, searched the mansion. In the secret room, they found more journals, ledgers of failed subjects, and hidden cameras that were used to monitor and condition the family members. They also found a series of secret underground tunnels and reinforced rooms, used for the isolation and training of the subjects. The Blackwood family, once thought of as eccentric geniuses, was now seen for what they truly were, a highly organized generational cult of abusers. The disappearances of certain Blackwood family members over the years, once dismissed as people leaving for the city, were now reclassified as potential homicides. The police began to exhume old graves, suspecting the bodies of those who failed were buried on the property. The truth about the family's control over the town began to unravel as well. They had been using their power and wealth to cover up crimes and silence anyone who got too close. The townspeople, once in awe of the Blackwoods, now looked at their beautiful mansion with a mixture of fear and disgust. The media got hold of the story, and it exploded. National news outlets and investigative journalists descended upon Blackwood. The story was a goldmine of psychological horror. The most insane genetic case in America became a national sensation, but the truth was far more disturbing than any genetic mutation. It was a testament to how human cruelty and a twisted ideology could be passed down through generations, hidden in plain sight. Evelyn became an instant celebrity, but she felt no sense of triumph. Her professional reputation was restored, but the cost was the immense psychological toll of what she had witnessed. She spent hours talking to law enforcement, to journalists, and to a team of psychologists who were now working with the other living Blackwood family members. The majority of them were found to be suffering from severe, long-term psychological trauma, and some were so far gone from the abuse that they were practically catatonic. Clara, the one who had taken a life, was a complex case. The psychologists found that her actions were a direct result of the extreme abuse she had suffered. Her mind, pushed to its breaking point, had responded with the very violence she had been conditioned to exhibit. She was a victim and a perpetrator, a chilling example of the destructive power of the Blackwood legacy. Her trial would be a landmark case, a debate over nature versus nurture, and a testament to the chilling power of psychological conditioning. Evelyn stayed in Blackwood for a few more days, helping the authorities and talking to the people she had met. She learned that Elias's death, at the hands of a traumatized victim, was the only way the cycle could have been broken. His control was absolute, and he would have stopped at nothing to keep his secrets. The town, once so quiet and secretive, was now buzzing with a grim sense of reality. The illusion of a perfect, idyllic town founded by a genius family was shattered, replaced by the grim reality of a horrifying human experiment. Evelyn packed her bags, ready to leave Blackwood for good. She'd come here for a story, for a scientific breakthrough. She had found a story far more profound and terrifying, a reminder that the most dangerous monsters are not born with a gene for evil, but are meticulously crafted by human hands. She had unraveled the Blackwood's web of lies, but the chilling lessons of their legacy would stay with her forever. The train ride out of Blackwood was a silent and somber journey for Evelyn. The dense forests of Oregon passed by the window, the tall, dark trees seeming to whisper the town's secrets as she sped away. The air, once heavy with the oppressive weight of a hidden evil, now felt charged with the aftermath of its exposure. The national news coverage had been relentless. The Blackwood family's legacy of cruelty was no longer a whispered rumor. It was a confirmed, documented reality. The town of Blackwood would never be the same. Evelyn's professional reputation, once in tatters, was now completely redeemed. Her initial discredited research on the violence gene had a new, horrifying context. She had been right about a pattern of inherited violence, but the source was not a biological one. It was a psychological one. She was hailed as a hero, a geneticist who had uncovered a human horror story and a groundbreaking case study in the effects of generational trauma and abuse. She was offered a prestigious position at a university with a blank check for her research. But the victory felt hollow. She had exposed a truth, but she had also witnessed firsthand the devastating consequences. Clara's face, a mask of cold emptiness, haunted her dreams. The other Blackwood family members, now free from Elias's control, were left with the ruins of their minds, a lifetime of psychological scars that would never truly heal. Evelyn understood now that a victory in such a case wasn't about a clean-cut solution. It was about managing the fallout of a deep-seated rot. She realized the most terrifying aspect of the Blackwood legacy was not the cruelty itself, but the idea that it was meticulously built, a conscious decision to create a monster. Elias and his ancestors were not born evil. They chose it, and they made it a part of their heritage. They had turned human beings into tools, into puppets, in a grand, twisted experiment. The genetic case was the most perfect and horrifying lie, a way to cloak their inhumanity in the language of science. Evelyn knew her work was not done. The case of the Blackwoods was a chilling example, but it was not unique. She would dedicate her life to studying the roots of human cruelty, not from a biological perspective, but from a psychological and sociological one. She would work to help the victims of such abuse, to understand the subtle cues and warning signs of such an environment, and to expose the darkness that can hide in plain sight. She would use the journals she had found, the chilling blueprint of human depravity, as a tool to help others. The Blackwoods would be her grim legacy, a constant reminder of the shadow that lurks beneath the surface of seemingly normal life. Her train pulled into the station. She was leaving Blackwood, but Blackwood would never leave her. The chilling whispers of the town, the image of Clara's broken eyes, the cold, knowing smile of Elias, it was all now a part of her. The world had a new understanding of the most insane genetic case. But Evelyn knew the truth was far more horrifying than a simple gene. It was the insane case of the human heart, and its terrifying capacity for darkness. Evelyn stepped onto the platform, leaving the past behind, but carrying its heavy, dark lessons into a future she was determined to make better. The story of the Blackwoods was over, but its echo would resonate forever, a chilling reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not born, but meticulously created, one broken soul at a time. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is the conclusion of our story. I hope you were as captivated by the dark secrets of the Blackwood family as I was. If you enjoyed this journey into psychological terror, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, this entire story is a work of fiction, a chilling look into the darkest corners of the human mind. The real horror is in the mind, not in the blood.